The Story of Mike by David McFadden. Mike was an overweight cub reporter who, on deadline, contrary to order, put his unfinished story on the spike and started reading the Holy Bible. The city editor panicked. "Golly, Mike, what's the matter? Are you on strike?" Mike felt a sense of loss, he told his boss. He was overcome by the strangest wish to discover if people had evolved from fish, and nothing could stop his resolution to keep reading till he found out about evolution. The boss told Mike if he didn't get on track toot sweet, he'd get the sack, and he could read the Bible front to back. 2 weeks since suspension with no compensation, Mike got to read the Old and New Testament all the way through with a speed that was fiery, but he refused to respond to any inquiry as to whether he'd found the secret of our ascent. This kind of verse is something like candy, high on etre, but low on raisin day. Mike was my friend, but we had no communication. We never sat down and had a real conversation. I thought of him as a reincarnation of Charlie Chaplin, though not quite as smart. He'd been seeing a young woman, a well-bred lass, a beauty in fact, but she'd broken his heart. Perhaps she felt he was lacking in class. He called her a tart, a tease, and a strumpet. He stood in front of her house by a tree in the middle of the night and played on his trumpet. Variations on the flight of the bumblebee. He could play C above high C, not in tune, but with lots of the spree. It didn't upset him that he'd been banished from her life, but that lovely Marie had fallen in love with a concert pianist. Mike interrupted the amorous pair walking one night with their arms interlaced after a performance of Little Schubert with the Hamilton Philharmonic at Hamilton Place. He said he was in despair, but she didn't care, so he wound up whacking the pianist in the face. Marie struck Mike with her umbrella as the pianist burst into tears. "What a wimp! Get it through your thick skull. This is my fella," she said, and added, "Get lost, you blimp." Mike slunk away with his heart full of woe, and he walked all night in a state of self-pity. He walked on the mountain, he walked down below, in the east, west, and north ends, and all through the city. His clothes were crumpled, and his face was ashen. The affair was over, but not the passion. All week he wondered what to do. Maybe he could learn to play the piano. But if he lost weight, could he win her anew? In his heart he knew she'd always say no. On Monday in the office, everyone knew that Mike was in trouble. You could see his distress. The publisher demanded his resignation. An editorial he'd written on the state of the nation had been lifted verbatim from the London Free Press. He tried to claim it wasn't his fault, but the publisher told him to clean out his junk. The pianist had charged him with assault. The cop said, "What do ya do it, ya skunk?" While out on bail, he wrote a ribald tale about lovely Marie. It was a sordid caper. No one knows how he fixed it, but the story appeared the following day on page 1 of the paper. They stopped the presses, but a few papers got out, infuriating and titillating the population. The publisher poured himself a triple libation. On the assault charge, Mike was put on probation. But that was years ago. Mike's become mild and meek. He now runs a music store in Stony Creek. But that was years ago. Mike's now in Clover, running a music store in lovely Port Dover. But that was years ago. Mike's no longer so ballsy. He runs a music store in Niagara Fallsy. But that was years ago. Mike's fat as a beluga and runs a music store in downtown Cayuga. But that was years ago. Mike settled down. He now runs a distillery in Waterloo. But that was years ago. Mike has a theory about a cross-border shopping, so he lives in Fort Erie. But that was years ago. Mike's now a priest and a member of Parliament for Hamilton East. But that was years ago. Mike's now called Fats and he owns the Hamilton Tiger Cats. But that was years ago. Mike's now a first-rater. In fact, he's the owner of the Hamilton Spectator. But that was years ago. Mike's a model civilian. You can hear him say if you really listen. Or, but that was years ago. Mike's no longer so droll, 'cause he's now a member of the board of control. Or, but that was years ago. Now it's Marie and Mike and the pianist, a threesome, and a little tyke. And that is The Story of Mike by David McFadden. And in case you're wondering why I was getting so quiet as I went along, the text slowly gets smaller and smaller with each or. Just smaller and smaller and smaller type. So that's why I was doing that. My dramatic reading of The Story of Mike by David McFadden.